Critical thinking. What comes to mind when someone says we need to use critical thinking? Do we focus on the word critical? Do we assume that thinking critically must be negative, requiring us to criticise or be critical of something we've read, heard or watched? This video is to help us understand what critical thinking is and how we can do it. As we go through this video, we will learn that thinking critically should not be assumed to be synonymous with criticising. Once we learn to think critically, we might criticise an argument or claim, but our thinking will be thoughtfully reasoned consideration, not reflexive, quick and unthinking judgment. In the concept of critical thinking, the term critical refers to a way of thinking, an analytical stance we take with regards to assessing claims that we've read, heard or saw. In this video, we'll look at the concept and activity of critical thinking. 1. We will construct a useful everyday definition of critical thinking and identify what critical thinking is not, and 2. Show us the purpose and value of critical thinking. According to one definition, critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analysing, synthesizing and or evaluating information gathered from or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning or communication as a guide to belief and action. In its exemplary form, it is based on universal intellectual values that transcend subject matter divisions: clarity, accuracy, precision, consistency, relevance, sound evidence, good reasons, depth, breadth and fairness. Another definition holds that critical thinking is the ability to think clearly and rationally about what to do or what to believe. It includes the ability to engage in reflective and independent thinking. Someone with critical thinking skills is able to do the following: understand the logical connection between ideas, identify, construct and evaluate arguments, detect inconsistencies and common mistakes in reasoning, solve problems systematically, identify the relevance and importance of ideas, reflect on the justification of one's own beliefs and values. Let's walk through these one by one, carefully and intentionally. Firstly, consider the ideas of being careful and judicious. Critical thinking is not a fast or easy process, even if we know how to do it. To do it properly requires us to take our time. Being careful and judicious requires us to be purposeful and deliberate in our evaluation. It also requires us to be thorough and look at the whole argument and not focus on one item that we think allows us to dismiss the rest of the evidence. To think critically, we have to focus on the issue at hand, taking in all its complexity, breadth and depth. Critical thinking is not passive. The goal of critical thinking is not simply to decide whether to accept or reject an argument to register a yea or nay vote. In critical thinking, the goal is to fully evaluate all parts have a claim that someone has made, to assess each of its parts as well as the whole. Certainly, there are relatively easy black and white cases. For example, consider the claim that was made in the day of Columbus, when people said ships sailing east from Europe will eventually fall into space because the Earth is flat. We don't need to be an expert in critical thinking to see this as an example of an argument that's pretty easy to reject in totality, assuming we know the vacant Earth is not flat. However, much more often we are asked to think critically about more complex, challenging claims or arguments that contain much more grey than they do black or white. So in such cases, it's much harder to say, I agree or I disagree. Critical thinking is the logical process that we go through to determine whether we agree or not. Critical thinking allows us to explain why we disagree, what parts of the claim or argument we find wrong or troubling, and even what argument we might make in its place. But we should keep in mind the whole picture. As we proceed in learning about critical thinking, we'll find that by offering alternatives to the argument, us and others involved strengthen and clarify views and positions, but it's worth remembering that others may have more information than you in certain subjects, or that they can't present all the evidence for various reasons. That means thinking critically about what we're reading, as well as claims made by our peers, family and friends. Sometimes we will have to critically evaluate claims made by others and assess if the facts they present change or contradict past statements. Other times we'll be asked to actively defend our own claims, which will require us to think critically about our own perspectives and positions. Critical thinking is not a process that most people use in their daily activities, but it's important to both our understanding of what people say and what we think and say to others. At times we may struggle to use the critical thinking process, and that's okay. Secondly, let's consider the use of reason or logic. Critical thinking is an active process meant to move us, whether it's a family member or friend, or another community that we belong to, towards greater understanding of difficult social and ethical problems. In order to do this effectively, critical thinking requires applying reason or logic. We can more deeply examine reason. We can develop yardsticks for assessing whether an argument is a product of good, thoughtful reasoning, or a misrepresentation of facts is presented, depending on who we are speaking to. We will compare reason with other ways of judging or reacting to claims. For example, people often make decisions based on pure emotion, intuition, faith, loyalty to a person or friend, or common sense. Utilising reason does not necessarily mean throwing these sensibilities, emotion, intuition, etc. out the window. It's not cold, hard, or unfeeling, but critical thinking requires putting these other ways of thinking and reacting under the microscope of reason. For example, many people decide not to try certain activities because they say, "I'm too scared, I can't go running tonight," or "I don't have anyone else to run with, and I'm afraid of running by myself at night." Fear, like all emotions, can either be justified or unfounded. When we expose this emotional response to reason, we can determine whether it's justified or not. Are there good reasons to be fearful running alone at night? Is the area known for crime? Are there wild animals or dogs to worry about? Is it easy to get lost? By asking these kinds of questions, we can probe to see whether our emotion, i.e. fear, is the product of a reasonable assessment of the situation. Finally, let's consider these last two pieces of the definition of critical thinking: judgments and application, to determine whether a claim is true and deciding how to act based on that determination. They speak to the purpose of critical thinking. When we engage in critical thinking, our goal is to determine whether the claim before us is true or not, and then to use that assessment to decide what action or actions to take. Ultimately, when we are asked to think critically, we are being asked to take a position regarding the truth or acceptability of something we've been presented with, regardless of what we've read, heard, or watched. While the exercise of critical thinking is not biased towards one outcome or the other, in the end we're expected to have a reasoned judgment about whether we disagree or agree with the claim or argument. So why do we need to take a position or pass judgment? Let's consider the following scenario. One of your classes requires students to complete a group project, worth 50% of the final grade. You are put into a group with 4 other students. At your first meeting, one of your group members says, "Listen, I've done this whole group project thing before, and it's a real pain in the butt. Nobody really likes working with other people, and we'll all end up fighting. It's too hard to split up the parts of the project. No one's ever happy with their part. Last time I had to do one of these things, we decided that each of us would just do the whole project. Then we shared our reports and voted on the best one. That's the one we turn into the professor. We should do the same thing for this class." Is this a good argument? Do you agree with all the claims he made? Do those claims necessarily lead to his conclusion about how to handle the project? Should you go along with your classmate, or is there a better way to handle the project? Remember, 50% of your final grade is at stake here. Your classmates had certain experiences that make you believe that doing group project work separately as individuals is better than dividing up the tasks among the group. If you simply accept his belief without question, without thinking about it critically, you may come to share his belief simply as an inherited opinion. An inherited opinion means that you believe completing group projects this way is better because someone else told you it was better. Now, many of us hold inherited opinions about a lot of topics. Frequently, more political, moral and ethical beliefs have been handed down to us by our families or our communities. How many of us could actually provide evidence or reasons for those beliefs if asked to do so? But we are often required to do just that. We live in a diverse, complicated world in which people hold wildly different views on many topics. Individuals, communities, businesses and governments need to decide what to do on many issues that are the subject of strong disagreements. Critical thinking will help us both offer reasons for our own positions on what action should be taken and effectively evaluate the reasons offered by others, remembering that others may have access to more information than you but are unable to share it, or they may be inconsistent on what they present. To see how important critical thinking can be, consider this scenario. You're working as a marketing assistant for a marketing company. You've been in that position for a few years and you're looking to catch the attention of your supervisor. You know there's a marketing manager position opening up soon and you've got your eye on it. You want to distinguish yourself. Fortunately, an opportunity presents itself. Your supervisor asks both you and your co-worker, who's also an assistant, what you think the company should focus on for an upcoming ad campaign. Should they invest more resources in traditional marketing venues like print and TV ads, for example, or in innovative online and social media venues? Wanting to seem like you're on top of things and ready to go, you respond quickly with an email. Definitely traditional venues. And here's how we should spend the money in those venues. Your co-worker doesn't respond right away, but the next day offers her assessment. We should go with the online and social media. I've attached a detailed report showing the recent trends and market research, with data that demonstrates the increased return on investment a social media marketing campaign compared with traditional venues. Who do you think will get the attention of the supervisor? The employee who made an unsupported claim about what to do? You? Or the employee who offered evidence and reason for her position? Taking the time to assess beliefs and opinions, to think critically about them, gives us insight and understanding that we would not have developed without critical thinking. Insight and understanding leads to justification for taking or not taking certain actions, but it also gives us ownership over our beliefs. As we think critically about our own and others' beliefs, we develop the skills that allow us to know why we believe what we believe. We can offer evidence and reason to defend our beliefs, and that reasoning leads us to actions that fit with our beliefs. Ultimately, we have true freedom of thought and opinion that comes when we know what we believe and why. I hope this video has provided you with a working definition of critical thinking, and you will now be able to explain what critical thinking is and how it's different from other types of thought.
More bacon than the pan can handle. Better the devil, 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 you know, 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 better the devil, you know.